let's use Reactive Extensions to add pagination to a .NET application. And to increase the hype of this demo, we're going to use .NET MAUI. By the end of this video, we'll be able to paginate through a list of cat facts in a .NET MAUI application. And our pagination is going to be powered by Reactive Extensions. But currently, we haven't implemented pagination with Reactive Extensions, so our UI just shows all the cat facts, and our pagination does not work. And this is not ideal, because it might be expensive to fetch and display all of the cat facts. So that being said, let's implement pagination with Reactive Extensions to save the day. Let's begin by implementing these previous and next page buttons. And currently, we're not even tracking the current page. So in our cat facts view model, let's add a property for the current page. So we'll use our handy prop change snippet. I'll leave a link to this snippet in the description. And we'll name this property current page. And by default, when we start the application, the current page will be 0. So the first page in our list of cat facts. Now when we click our previous and next buttons on the UI, we want to update the current page property. And we're going to do that via commands. So in our view model, let's add a property for our previous page command. So this is what our previous page button is going to hook up to. And this command is just going to be a relay command. So with a relay command, we can just pass in a callback here instead of defining an entire class command. And this is helpful because our command implementation is going to be pretty simple. All we want to do is decrement the current page by 1. So this handles the previous page button. We also want a command for the next page button. We'll call this the next page command. And opposite of the previous page, we want to increment the current page by 1. Now let's hook up these commands to the buttons on our UI. So our previous page button is going to hook up to the previous page command, and our next page button is going to bind to the next page command. Now that our current page property is changing, let's tap into this with Reactive Extensions and update the cat facts that we're displaying based on the current page. Whoops, and we need to install Reactive Extensions real quick. So let's go to our project, go to Manage NuGet Packages, and search for SYSTEM.REACTIVE. And we're going to install this first result, SYSTEM.REACTIVE. Let's install that latest version. So when our current page property changes, we call onPropertyChanged, which raises the property changed event on our view model. And this property changed event is typically used to notify our view about updates on our view model, but we can also tap into this event with Reactive Extensions to perform something whenever the event fires. And that's exactly what we want to do. Whenever property changed is fired for our current page event, we want to fetch and display the cat facts for the new current page. So again, we want to tap into the property changed event. So we're going to use observable.FromEventPattern. And FromEventPattern wants to know the handler type of the property changed event. So that's property changed event handler, as well as the args type, which is property changed event args. We also need to tell FromEventPattern how to subscribe to the property changed event. So that's straightforward. Via a handler, we simply do a plus equals on the property changed event on our view model. And we also need to tell FromEventPattern how to unsubscribe. That's just the inverse. We take a handler and we do a minus equals to unsubscribe from property changed. Next up, we only care about property changes from the current page property. So we can filter out any other properties via the where operator. So on this observable, we can do a where, and we only want events where the property name is the name of our current page property. So there we go. This observable now represents our current page property changing. Let's subscribe to this observable, and when our current page changes, we're just going to reload our cat facts. And if you're wondering what this underscore is that I have before load cat facts, that's just to hide this warning where Visual Studio complains because we're not awaiting this async method, which is something we should be doing, because not awaiting this, it's basically just a fire and forget. We can't have any error handling, so we won't know if loading the cat facts fails. But no worries, we're going to resolve this in just a bit via Reactive Extensions. So we're reloading our cat facts whenever the current page changes, but we're not actually fetching the current page. So instead of fetching all the cat facts, passing in a limit of 1000, let's pass in a limit of 10. So we're only going to display 10 cat facts per page. Let's pass that to our cat facts query. And then we need to calculate the offset based on the current page. So on page 0, our offset is going to be 0 and our limit's going to be 10. So that means we're going to take the first 10 cat facts. And then on page 1, we want our offset to be 10 and our limit to be 10. so that we take the next 10 catfacts. So to calculate that, our offset is based on the current page times how many we show per page, which is the limit. So let's pass in that offset. So putting this in action, we start our application and we begin on page 1. We show the first 10 catfacts. We can click the next button and increment the current page. In our observer for the current page changing, we load the next set of catfacts and we query the next page of catfacts. So our offset here is 10 since we move to the next page, and our limit is still 10. And as we can see, let's remove these breakpoints and we can go back and forth between these pages. So even though our observable is working, we still need to do some error handling. More specifically, if the load catfacts call fails, we should handle that in our observer. But the way this is structured and the way we call load catfacts as a fire and forget async method is going to be ugly to work around. So instead, let's incorporate the catfacts query into our observable chain, and then we'll be able to handle errors in the error callback of our observer. So whenever our observable raises a property changed event for the current page changing, we're going to map that event using select into another observable that's going to load our catfacts. And this observable is going to be FromAsync because we're executing an async method to load the catfacts, and we just need to pass in a callback that'll call load catfacts. So we're mapping our current page property changed observable into a new observable that's going to load the catfacts. And we ultimately want to subscribe to this inner observable that we've mapped to. So to do that, we simply need to call switch. And what this does is switches us onto subscribing to this inner observable. And now in our subscribe method, we really don't need to do anything because we've already called load catfacts earlier in our observable chain. And as we recall, that fetches and updates the catfacts. And I really don't like that. I don't like that in our observable chain, we have this side effect that updates the state of our viewmodel. Ideally, I would like this update to be in our observer. So when we subscribe in our callback with the new catfacts data, I would like to take that data and explicitly update the catfacts. I don't like this side effect where we do it in the middle of our observable stream. So let's refactor load catfacts to be get catfacts. And this is going to return the catfact listing that we get back from our catfacts query. So let's just return that result. And now we can move the handling where we update the catfacts into our observer. And this observer is going to receive the catfact listing data because earlier in our observable, we switched onto this async observable that returns our catfact listing. All right, so testing this out, application loads, but we don't update the catfacts, and that's expected because we now just call get catfacts in our viewModel constructor, which does not include updating the catfacts. So that's expected that we show nothing. But if we click next, we show the next page of catfacts. But if we take a closer look at this, we can see this is quite a lot of catfacts, more than 10, which is our limit. And we can see that we're displaying each catfact twice. So we can see a cat's hearing is better than a dog's. And again down here, a cat's hearing is better than a dog's. And this is surprising because if we put a breakpoint in the current page setter and then look at the current state of our catfacts collection, we can see there's only 10 catfacts. So we don't have duplicate catfacts in our viewModel data. So not exactly sure why this is happening, but I noticed that if we observe on the UI thread, so in our observable, if we do ObserveOn synchronization context.current, this resolves the issue. So go to the next page, and we can see we only show 10 catfacts. So if there was an issue with updating the catfacts off of the UI thread, I would have expected an exception, but instead we got duplication of our catfacts collection, which was odd. But key takeaway, make sure your observable stays on the UI thread by using ObserveOn synchronization context.current. Anyways, now our catfacts query is inside our observable stream, so we can handle any errors from that query in our observer. So now in our observer, let's pass in an error handler. So take this error callback, and for now we'll just throw up a message box, and we should probably also clear the catfacts that we're displaying. So now, with our get catfacts request hard-coded to throw an exception, our error observer gets called, and we handle the exception how we wish. Next up, we need to fix the issue with our catfacs not loading on startup. And it would be nice if we could just fire our observable to update our catfacs when our application starts. And we can do that by merging our current observable for when the current page property changes with another observable that'll fire immediately when we subscribe. So let's break off this observable for when the current page property changes into its own observable that we're going to wrap with merge. So now we have the opportunity to bring in another observable that's going to fire immediately when we subscribe. And I found the easiest way to do this is just with an observable.return, and we can just pass in one empty object, which will cause this observable to fire once when we subscribe. So now that we're merging these observables together, we're going to fetch our catfacs and update our catfacs whenever the current page property changes, and when observable.return fires once when we first subscribe. So now we no longer need this initial get catfacs fire and forget call. We've now integrated our initial catfacs loading into our observable. And when our application starts, we load the first page of catfacs, and we can still move between our pages. So we've just about wrapped up the beef of our observable. One cool thing that I want to show off about observable from async is that if for some reason we have a delay on our async method and the user spams whatever triggers this observable, it'll cancel previous executions of our async method and not emit those to our observer. So for example, I have this 3-second delay hard-coded on our catfacs query, and if I spam back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, it's only going to emit once for whatever the last current page was. So here we emit once with whatever page we were on, and we update the catfacs. So there's no bottleneck where our observer just suddenly receives a bunch of finished catfac queries. It's only going to receive the latest catfac query and will automatically cancel the previous catfac queries that we were waiting on, but we no longer care about. Alright, so these were really all the reactive extensions topics that I wanted to cover. So we'll get to summarizing these in a bit, but let's do some freestyling and finish up our pagination. So the next thing I want to do is make this limit, so how many catfacs we show per page, customizable. So let's add another property. This will be a prop change, an int for current items per page, and we'll name that property current items per page. Give this a default value of 10. That's what we're using right now. Now let's reference that property. So our limit will point to the current items per page. So now we just need to update this current items per page whenever we click the corresponding buttons on our UI. So we have a button for 10, 20, and 50. And ideally, I don't want to create a command per button. So let's create a single command to handle whenever we click either of those buttons. And this command is going to update the current items per page. So we'll call this update items per page command. And since I want to use the same command for all of these buttons, we're going to need a parameter from this relay command. So this callback ideally should take something like items per page as a parameter, and we'll be able to use that parameter to set the current items per page. So each of these commands, or each of these buttons, would pass a different parameter to this command. So for example, the 50 button will pass 50 as the items per page. But currently, our relay command doesn't pass the parameter, so we should update it to do that. So let's pass this parameter from the command execution to our callback, which means our callback is going to have to be generic for the parameter. Let's make this entire relay command generic. So we'll make it some kind of T type, and we'll get a callback for some kind of type. And then when we call the callback with this object parameter, let's just do some casting for whatever type our relay command wants. So whatever our callback expects, we'll just cast the object parameter to that type and hope that we don't get any exceptions from bad casting. So ideally, should have some error handling here and some kind of fallback. Probably wouldn't have this hard cast in production. But nonetheless, we'll be able to get our expected parameter into our command. So this update items per page command will be a relay command that receives an integer parameter. And these other commands can just receive objects since we don't even use the parameter anyways. So let's just make those generic for objects. So now we should be good to reference this command from our view. So let's update all of these buttons to bind. Binding to the update items per page command. There we go. And now we can specify a command parameter. So we can't just pass in 10 here because that's a string. And then we're going to try and cast the string parameter to an int, since that's what our type of relay command is. And that's going to throw an exception. So we want our parameter to not be a string. We want it to be an int. And we can actually do that in XAML using xint32. So we're specifying that this is an int. And for this command, we want the int to be 10. So this will work. So for this other command, we want the int to be 20. And for the 50 command, we want the int to be 50 for that command parameter. So it should be good here. We should be updating the current items per page. We should probably confirm that. Let's put a setter. Actually, I'm feeling pretty confident. Let's jump straight to integrating this update. So whenever we update the current items per page, we want to re-execute a catfax update. So we're going to have to integrate that property change into our observable. So we can just carry on from this current page change observable. And we can just check if the current page property changed or the current items per page property changed. So check if that property name has changed. Let's try and clean this up a little bit. Move it on to new lines. And there we go. So now, whenever property change gets raised and the current page or the current items per page properties have changed, we are going to refetch our catfax with those new parameters. So let's try this out. Here we go. So let's change our items per page to 50. And there we go. We show all the catfax. And we can go back to 10. There we go. But one thing we should fix is if we go a few pages forward and then click 50, then I guess we're technically on page 3 and we changed items per page to 50. So that means our offset is going to be our current page 3 times our limit of 50. And we're going to skip the first 150 catfax, which means we end up with none. So whenever we change the items per page, we should just go back to the first page. So we can handle that in the setter. We can set the current page back to 0, which means our current page property is going to change. And we also changed the current items per page. And that means we're going to execute, or this observable is going to fire twice. So really, we could just remove the observing on the current items per page property, since that's already going to change the current page. So let's not fire our observable whenever current items per page changes. So let's remove that handling and only fire when the current page changes, and that'll implicitly handle whenever the current items per page change. So let's go forward a few times, change to 50, and there we go, we're back on page 1. So that handles the items per page, but I also want to disable the previous button if there's no previous page, and disable the next button if there's no next page. So let's start with disabling the previous page button if we do not have a previous page. This will be straightforward. So we'll expose a property for has previous page. And we do have a previous page if the current page does not equal 0. So if the current page does equal 0, so we're on the first page, obviously we do not have a previous page. So has previous page if the current page is not the first page. And since has previous page depends on the current page property, we need to raise on property changed for has previous page whenever the current page changes, so that we can notify the UI if we have a previous page or not whenever we change the current page. And that'll allow the UI to update and either disable or enable the previous page button. But to do that, we need to bind to has previous page from our previous page button. So is enabled on that button will be a binding to has previous page. So let's see this in action real quick. So when we load up, we'll be on the first page and that button should be disabled. And there we go. It is disabled. We can go to the next page and now it is enabled. And there we go. So that does work as expected. No, it does not. What is going on? Is this some kind of MAUI bug? So this button looks like it's disabled, but if I click it, it works. So it's not disabled. It works, but it looks like it is. Not sure what's going on there. That is very strange. Let me know if there's some kind of bug in my code, but I don't know. It looks fine. It seems like it's some kind of MAUI bug, especially since we can still click the button. It obviously is enabled. It just doesn't look enabled. Anyways, let's move on and handle has next page. So this will determine if we can click the next button, even though MAUI is going to style the button however it wishes. This one's going to be a little bit more tricky because we need to know the total items in our collection. So we can get that. Let's start by adding a property, a prop change for total items. And we can set that property in our observers. So this catfact listing that we get back contains the total items. So we can take that catfact listing and get the total. And now that we know the total items, we can calculate the total amount of pages that we have. So we can have an int for that, total pages. And for this, we want to use math ceiling. And we want to take the result of the total items divided by how many items we show per page. And this is tricky, so one of these needs to be a double so that our result is a double, because that's what math.ceiling wants, which means total pages is going to have to be a double as well, even though we're doing math.ceiling and it's going to be a whole number. And we can use that to determine if we have a next page or not. So if the current page plus 1 is less than the total pages, then we have another page that we can go to. So now we just need to call onPropertyChanged when appropriate so that our UI can re-grab has next page. So this value depends on total items. So we'll call onPropertyChanged whenever total items changes. And it also depends on current page. So we'll call onPropertyChanged for has next page whenever current page changes. So now let's bind to has next page on our UI. So the next button will be enabled when we do have a next page. All right, let's try this out. So go to the next page and again. So here we go. We only show 5 catfacts on the last page. And of course that means we don't have a next page to go to. Now, if we show 50 items per page, then we are showing all of our catfacts. I believe we're showing 45. That makes sense. We cannot click next. So this pagination is working. Same behavior where it's not updating these buttons all the time. Like, they don't look enabled, but they are. So that's a little bit frustrating, but MAUI, still kind of new. It's bound to have bugs, unfortunately. But our pagination is complete. A little bonus content there, finishing up some pagination features with the buttons and the items per page. But to summarize their reactive extensions, which was really the main topic here, we first created an observable so that we could observe whenever our current page property changes. And whenever that property does change, we fetch new catfacts for the current page. Then we switch to observe on this observable to fetch new catfacts. And we also want to observe on our UI thread so that we don't get weird bugs where we show duplicate catfacts. And then we take the catfact result and update the catfacts that we display on the UI. We also wanted to fire this observable on startup. So we merged in an observable.return that returns a 1 value, which means this will fire when we first subscribe and update the catfacts when our application starts. We were also able to add some error handling since we included our catfacts fetch within our observable chain. So we no longer had a fire and forget query, and we could handle errors. So hopefully you can apply these concepts to your own .NET application, maybe a .NET MAUI application, to implement pagination with reactive extensions.